So, the memo has now been released, and as promised, I'm going to be doing an intimate review of the memo's contents. So the memo pretty much starts off discussing the FISA program and how it works, and basically outlining its procedures. First, it requires usually the signature of the deputy director or the director of the FBI, and then it requires the signature of the deputy attorney general or the attorney general. Now, of course, Jeff Sessions recused himself from the Russia investigation, so the part of the signature that would require the signature from the head of the Justice Department seems to have been filled in by Rod Rosenstein and the previous acting Attorney General, Sally Yates. Now, Sally Yates was the acting Attorney General until Trump fired her because she refused to implement the Muslim ban. The other two figures that would involve their signatures are the director of the FBI, in this case James Comey, and the deputy director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe. The first section of the memo then talks about the 90-day requirement for the FISA programs when it needs to come up for renewal. This basically requires you to go straight to the FISA judge and update the judge with all new and relevant information. The target of this specific FISA investigation was a Trump campaign official by the name of Carter Page. However, in this memo, it states that there were omissions to the FISA judge that approved the FISA warrants in the first place. The omissions are stated in the following order. Number 1. The dossier compiled by Christopher Steele, the Steele dossier, on behalf of the Democratic National Committee and the Hillary Clinton campaign formed an essential part of the Carter Page FISA application. Steele was a longtime FBI source who was paid over $160,000 by the DNC and Clinton campaign via the law firm Perkins, Cole, and research firm Fusion GPS to obtain derogatory information on Donald Trump's ties to Russia. Section A. Neither the initial application in October 2016 nor any of the renewals disclose or reference the role of the DNC Clinton campaign or any party/campaign in funding Steele's efforts, even though the political origins of the Steele dossier were then known to senior DOJ and FBI officials. Section B. The initial FISA application notes Steele was working for a named U.S. person but does not name Fusion GPS and Principal Glenn Simpson, who was paid by a U.S. law firm Perkins Cole representing the DNC, even though it was known by DOJ at the time that political actors were involved with the Steele dossier. The application does not mention Steele was ultimately working on behalf of and paid by the DNC and Clinton campaign, or that the FBI had separately authorized payment to Steele for the same information. So the summary of the first part is pretty much that the FBI or the Justice Department knew that the Clinton campaign had funded the dossier involving the PP tape, and that it was omitted from the FISA judge. The only publicly known link that would cause a conflict of interest for the FBI in investigating Hillary Clinton was with the deputy director, Andrew McCabe, who has a wife named Jill McCabe, who ran for the Virginia State Senate in 2015, where she received a cash donation from Terry McAuliffe, who is the Virginia governor, or was the Virginia governor, and is a Clinton ally. To be very specific, Terry McAuliffe was also the chairman of the 2008 Hillary Clinton campaign. Okay, let's move on to part 2. The Carter Page FISA application also cited extensively a September 23, 2016 Yahoo News article by Michael Isikoff, which focuses on Page's July 2016 trip to Moscow. This article does not corroborate the Steele dossier because it is derived from information leaked by Steele himself to Yahoo News. The Page FISA application incorrectly assesses that Steele did not directly provide information to Yahoo News. Steele has admitted in British court filings that he met with Yahoo News and several other outlets in September 2016. At the direction of Fusion GPS, Perkins Coie was aware of Steele's initial media contacts because they hosted at least one meeting in Washington, D.C. in 2016 with Steele and Fusion GPS where this matter was discussed. Part A. Steele was suspended and then terminated as an FBI source for what the FBI defines as the most serious of violations, an unauthorized disclosure to the media of his relationship with the FBI in an October 30th, 2016 Mother Jones article by David Korn. Steele should have been terminated for his previous undisclosed contacts with Yahoo and other outlets in September before the page application was submitted to the FISC in October, but Steele improperly concealed from and lied to the FBI about those contacts. Part B. Steele's numerous encounters with the media violated the cardinal rule of source handling, maintaining confidentiality, and demonstrated that Steele had become less than a reliable source for the FBI. So to be objective, Steele, the guy that created the dossier, frequently lied to the FBI about his contacts with the media. They did not terminate him because of the dossier. The fact that Steele was willing to lie to the FBI about his media contacts shows that he is capable of lying. Lying to the FBI is a felony. So this may be a very bad moment for Steele. But let's read on. Part 3. Before and after Steele was terminated as a source, he maintained contact with the DOJ via then Associate Deputy Attorney General Bruce Orr, a senior DOJ official who worked closely with Deputy Attorney Generals Yates and later Rosenstein. Shortly after the election, the FBI began interviewing Orr, documenting his communications with Steele. For example, in September 2016, Steele admitted to Orr his feelings against then-candidate Trump when Steele said he was desperate that Donald Trump not get elected and was passionate about him not being president. This clear evidence of Steele's bias was recorded by Orr at the time and subsequently in official FBI files, but not reflected in any of the page FISA applications. Section A. During this same time period, Orr's wife was employed by Fusion GPS to assist in the cultivation of opposition research on Trump. Orr later provided the FBI with all of his wife's opposition research, paid for by the DNC and Clinton's campaign via Fusion GPS. The Orr's relationship with Steele and Fusion GPS was inexplicably concealed from the FISC. Okay, so now we got a bit of a smoking gun here. Apparently, Steele admitted to Orr, the Associate Attorney General, or whatever he is, and apparently Orr has that recorded and placed in FBI files. Now, the fact that Steele, who created the dossier that started this entire thing, has stated that he does not want Trump elected and despises Trump, that creates a possible ulterior motive for creating the dossier. So unless this dossier is corroborated by a different source, the dossier may become inadmissible. Okay, let's get on to Part 4. Part 4. According to the head of the Counterintelligence Division, Assistant Director Bill Priestap, corroboration of the Steele dossier was in its infancy at the time of the initial page FISA application. After Steele was terminated, a source validation report conducted by an independent unit within FBI assessed Steele's reporting as only minimally corroborated. Yet, in early January 2017, Director Comey briefed President-elect Trump on a summary of the Steele dossier, even though it was, according to his June 2017 testimony, salacious and unverified. While the FISA application relied on Steele's past record of credible reporting on other unrelated matters, it ignored or concealed his anti-Trump financial and ideological motivations. Furthermore, Deputy Director McCabe testified before the committee in December 2017 that no surveillance warrant would have been sought from the FISC without the Steele dossier information. So now here's a bit of a bombshell. Apparently, the whole dossier was barely corroborated by the FBI when the investigation was proceeding. And also that Andrew McCabe testified before Congress that the investigation would not be possible without the dossier. Okay, so now we're going to be bringing up the final section of the memo. Last but not least, number 5. The Page FISA application also mentions information regarding fellow Trump campaign advisor George Papadopoulos, but there is no evidence of any cooperation or conspiracy between Page and Papadopoulos. The Papadopoulos information triggered the opening of an FBI counterintelligence investigation in late July 2016 by FBI agent Pete Strzok. Strzok was reassigned by the Special Counsel's Office to FBI Human Resources for improper text messages with his mistress, FBI attorney Lisa Page, no known relation to Carter Page, where they both demonstrated a clear bias against Trump and in favor of Clinton, whom Strzok had also investigated. The Strzok-Lisa Page texts also reflect extensive discussions about the investigation, orchestrating leaks to the media, and including a meeting with Deputy Director McCabe to discuss an insurance policy against President Trump's election. So now this changes the game a bit. Apparently, what I said earlier about the dossier being the main reason for the FBI investigation is no longer true. According to this very memo by Devin Nunes and his staff, George Papadopoulos was the trigger for the original FBI investigation in June of 2016. So now discrediting the dossier will not exactly get the entire investigation shut down. It only casts doubt on the dossier as being used for additional evidence. So my overall opinion on the memo is we need more information. What has been made clear is that Christopher Steele has stated for FBI record that he does not wish for Donald Trump to be elected president. And the person he was stating this to is married to a woman who works for Fusion GPS, the opposition research firm that did the investigation into Donald Trump to get the dossier from Christopher Steele in the first place. She was also working in the specific part of the firm that was dedicated to getting that opposition research. So this guy Orr, who I believe is the Associate Deputy Attorney General, should have definitely recused himself from this investigation because of his wife's connections to Fusion GPS and Christopher Steele. But here's what we also know. In the very beginning of the memo, before it goes into the 5 omissions, the memo states that the FBI/Justice Department had visited the FISA court 4 different times, meaning there were 3 different renewals. Now, the same information cannot be used to get a renewal, which would mean that the new information found from the original FISA warrant would have to be used to renew it. So there was new information that the FBI/the Justice Department provided to the FISA court to get a renewal for the FISA warrant. But it also could be argued that since the FBI/Justice Department omitted information from the FISA court judge for the first FISA warrant, then it would void any information retrieved in future FISA renewals. Unfortunately, we don't know what new information the FBI got for renewing the FISA warrants, and whether that new information contributed to any indictments. But as for the Papadopoulos revelation, the supposed political bias by Strzok and his so-called mistress could be irrelevant without the full context of the contents of the text messages between each other. Because as point number 5 says, it was the Papadopoulos information that triggered the investigation. So if the contents of the text messages allude or even confirm that the Papadopoulos information was fake or was proven to not be true, but the 5th point also mentions that it was because of these text messages that existed between him and his mistress that he was removed from his position and placed in a new position within the FBI. So unless evidence surfaces that Papadopoulos and his information that triggered the investigation were false or fabricated, this investigation is still on. And it's also worthy to note that Papadopoulos has been indicted for lying to the FBI. He was indicted by Robert Mueller, who, strangely enough, was not even mentioned once in this memo. And you don't really need to convince me that the FBI is willing to abuse its authority to get what it wants, because they've done similar shit like this to Martin Luther King. My final verdict on this memo is that heads should definitely roll. And if the FBI was solely relying on the dossier provided by Christopher Steele, then I think the FBI investigation should be shut down. However, with the Papadopoulos revelation, unfortunately, I don't see the precedent for shutting down the investigation because of the dossier if the Papadopoulos information was the overall trigger for the investigation to begin with. And this memo does not implicate Robert Mueller in any way. So for Mueller to be removed from the investigation and have the investigation shut down at this point would most likely be a political disaster for Trump, because it would give the Democrats a reason to vote. And as for the whole issue of political bias, I don't think your politics or political opinion should be grounds for dismissal from doing a job. But what it does mean is that the information gathered should probably be corroborated. That way it doesn't become an issue. Because in my last video, I expressed some reservations about this memo because it was being handled by Devin Nunes, who was on Trump's transition team. So Devin Nunes' involvement with President Trump wouldn't matter if he corroborates the information that is put in his memo. And as for the FBI agents leaking information to the media, I'm not exactly against that. To me, that's transparency. All that really matters is if the information is true. But in the macro picture, this memo clearly states that there is misuse of FISA warrants by the FBI. And there is no telling how many people have been affected by these same abuses. So even though the revelation of these abuses by the FBI and Justice Department are illuminating, I do not think they're enough to shut down the Mueller investigation. So that pretty much does it for me. I'm Prometheus the Prophet, signing off.